wonderful community here. Everyone's eager to do some service and to offer shelter to those who are steeped in the suffering of the material world because of ignorance. Maybe, if it's comfortable, you can move up a little bit too. It just seems like I'm speaking to an auditorium. That is a beautiful garland. Thank you very much. So Caitanya Mahaprabhu gave ample instructions to his disciples, who then passed them on through their writings. And one of the ways in which Caitanya Mahaprabhu gave instructions was to consolidate principles so that anyone anywhere could be successful in the practice of spiritual life. There's a way in which a high-minded philosophy, when not accessible, is useless. It is that may have some concept of God, but if we can't feel a direct connection to God, and we don't feel inspired by the process, as Krishna says in the Gita, pratyakshavgamam dharmyam, should be directly experienced. Give the process of Krishna consciousness in such a way that people anywhere could absorb it. And similarly with the acharyas who came after Caitanya Mahaprabhu, like Narottam Das Thakur, who put the philosophy of Krishna consciousness into song. You may notice that when people are good singers and songwriters, people are eager to go and be in the same place to hear them. There's something very moving about someone who writes lyric and then sings it. And of course, that's one of the main processes of Krishna consciousness. And Narottam Das Thakur did that, so did many other acharyas. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wrote hundreds of songs as a means by which people could hear something that was appealing to the ear and had some rhythm to it, and then would be attracted. One day when I was on Govardhan Parikram, just coming past Uddhavakund and on the way to Radhakund Shamakund, there's a long stretch that you probably are aware of if you go to Govardhan. And there was a sangha there who had a bhajan going. And I couldn't pass because it was so compelling, the beat. I had to sit down. I couldn't go. They were rocking, and the bhajan was very sweet. And I was just thinking that this aesthetic that Caitanya Mahaprabhu brought to give everyone the appealing aspect of life, which is to chant and dance and have association with advanced devotees, is a very direct process also. And I read in the Sri Bhakti Siddhanta Vaibhav that Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur particularly liked the song Radha Krishna Bol, so much so that he copied it in multiples, and he would distribute it to the people in general so they could hear the simple philosophy in Bengali. So Caitanya Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami about 64 practices of devotional service. And then he consolidated it into 5. And he said, these 5 processes out of the 64 are so powerful that if one is connected with them even a little bit, even if one doesn't have faith in them, then such a person will advance in Krishna consciousness handily. And those 5 are association with devotees, hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, specifically Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, in the association of like-minded devotees who are more advanced than oneself, worshipping the deity, living in a holy dham, and chanting Hare Krishna. 5. And if one can organize one's life and have even a slight touch of these 5 on some regular basis, well, especially every day, the Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, which means always be engaged. Our acharyas say that means at least once a day. But people are busy. They've got places to go and lots of obligations. So if one can organize one's life to be in contact with these 5, then one will notice the direct effect of devotional service, which is described in the first canto, 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam by Sutta Goswami when he said, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janiyat Yashu Vairagyam. That if you engage in direct devotional service, then it's natural that you'll develop knowledge and detachment. Knowledge means that you have a sense of the difference between yourself and the material world. You create a space. Kshetragnam chapimam viti sarva kshetri shubharata kshetra kshetragnaryo jnanam yatach jnanam atambama. Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gītā that knowledge means to be able to see the difference between you and your body. And vairagya, there's a way that you're not pushed to embrace the objects of the senses. It becomes a ludicrous idea. As Krishna says in the Gita also, Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate adyantavanta kaunteya nate shuramate buddha. So there's a way in which Krishna says material happiness is a misnomer because it has a beginning and an end. You start and then it's over, and that's no good. We don't like that because we're eternal. So he said a wise person is not attracted to this. And those are hard to get, those qualities. To have a sense of compartmentalization that I'm something different from my body. Most people think I am my body, and I am my country, and I am my car, and so forth. But one who takes to these 5 methods of devotional service naturally develops a sense of the difference between oneself and matter, which is really the main problem. The Bhagavatam, in one verse, tells us what the difficulty is in this world. Bhayam dvitiya abhinivesha tasyad ishat apetasya viparya yosmriti. That we've forgotten our relationship with Ishvara, with Kṛṣṇa. And what's more, we think that there's a separate reality from him, and we become absorbed in that, and that's called illusion. And because of that, fear arises, and the material world's pervaded by fear. And the solution is tanmaya tam buddha abhajetam bhaktyāika yesham gurudeva tatma, is just turn back toward Kṛṣṇa. So the methods Caitanya Mahaprabhu gave about Panchangam Bhakti, the 5 I mentioned, will bring us in contact directly with Kṛṣṇa. That will give us a fortification by knowledge and detachment from the world. You can't get it anywhere else. You can go to the best university and you won't get knowledge and detachment. Or you could go on YouTube and you could sign up, subscribe to maybe 1,000 self-help channels, and then you could listen to 10 self-help videos on each one of them. How many would that be?
10,000.
10,000? We should make it 1 million. And you still wouldn't get knowledge and detachment. But if you engage in Panchangam Bhakti, these 5 we mentioned, then the miracle happens. You get knowledge and detachment. And one of the ways that Srila Prabhupada gave us a protective force for our bhakti is his books. In the Bhagavatam, first canto, second chapter, again, Sutta Goswami says, Tachtradhana munayo Gana vairagya yuktaya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shuta grihitaya. That in order to be steady in devotional service, you should take part in hearing from the śāstras. Tashradhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pasyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shuta grihitaya. Prabhupada mentions in that context that it's really very important to hear. And if one hears, then one doesn't make mistakes. We don't mistake that I'm this body. And he says that it's important to hear the teachings of the Goswamis that heard from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then we can hear from them through their commentaries and writings. And so here I see a set of Bhagavatams, a set of Chaitanya Charitamritas, obviously Bhagavad-gītā's nearby, there it is. And these books are the cream of all of the teachings of the Vedas in general. The Vedas are a huge project meant to bring people from various situations in the material world, and there are many ways that one can be involved with the material world. Just as a catalog, 8,400,000 species of life. That's quite a few. Of course, there's variances within those, each one of those species as well. And it's not so easy to get unentangled from that. So when one comes into the human form and then gets an opportunity to hear from the cream of all the Vedas, which are catering to everyone from whatever situation they're in, to give them an opportunity to extricate oneself from the material world. If we take advantage of that, we'll readily make advancement in devotional service. So Prabhupada recommended that we read from his books on a regular basis. So I'm going to do that right now. Hare Krishna. Great to see you all. Plenty of room. Come on in. Thank you. Thank you very much. Is this working? It's plugged in? Nobody's complaining? No. Okay. Oh, that's good. So an experiment we do once a year at Govardhan Hill during Kartik is to come together and listen to a reading of Srimad Bhagavatam for a while, every day. It's our main focus. And we've noticed that it's quite absorbing. It takes a little practice, though. Frankly, yeah, we read 5 hours a day, 2.5 hours in the morning and 2.5 hours in the afternoon. And the devotees who come there and get a taste for it come again and again every year, and more people come. More people are coming now. We have a little theater set up so everyone who can't fit in the room can sit in the courtyard and even watch it on TV. I mean, what are they watching? Somebody reading. But you can hear. And I can see them also. And we notice that there's a kind of samadhi everyone gets absorbed in by hearing for long periods of time. After all, Devahuti complained to Kapila Dev. She said, it seems like I'm my body, and it seems like I'm never getting out of this. If you ever felt like that, you can relate to her complaint. And he responded, it's possible for everyone. Hearing for a long time, he said. Hear for a long time. Other encouraging words Kṛṣṇa gives, Bhagavad-gītā, Vita raga bayo krodha manmaya mamupashrita bahavo jnana tapasa. He said many people have gotten out of this like that. Like, don't worry, you can do this. So how do you do it? Panchangam Bhakti. And one of the processes is just to hear. So Prabhupada's books look a little ominous because there's so many of them. And we're so busy. And between us and the books is our mind also. It says, nah, you're not going to like that. But actually we do. The mind is in the mode of goodness. It gets ruffled by the modes of material nature, and in rajas it wants distraction constantly. That's what's happening nowadays. People are overstimulated and they get a lot of rajas in their mind. It takes a while to practice to sit down and chant or to sit and hear from the Srimad Bhagavatam for a while. And there are a few phenomena that you can notice sometimes if you sit down. You're feeling fine, but when you sit down to read, suddenly you start yawning. That's one of the symptoms of this rajas in the mind. In fact, it's mentioned in the Madhurya Kadambini that it's part of unsteadiness in bhakti that you get sleepy when you start to hear. But anybody can overcome that. It just takes a little practice. And one of the ways of community building is to take more and more time out to hear together. Because what can we do anyway? We can work hard and we can use our senses in Krishna's service. And this is a mighty community. All of you, we're feeling it all over the Bay Area and around the world. People are talking about you. Did you know that? No. You didn't know that, did you? You're too humble. That they're feeling the power of your coming together with a common purpose and working together. And one of the most important types of work that you can do is take time out to just hear Prabhupada's books. Just listen together. And Prabhupada said before he left, if you have questions, then read Bhagavatam together and hear, as you get answered. We find also in our hearing and chanting sessions that somebody will ask a question and then we keep reading and then it gets answered, oftentimes. We also find that when you hear, you come away with more questions than answers, and that's good. If you've ever noticed in a class, somebody gives a nice class and says, any questions? And everyone's like, nah, no questions. But just like when you take music lessons, if you study really hard, your teacher says 30 minutes a day, no less. And then you don't do it. Maybe you got in one day or two, or you go back, and you don't have any questions. Because the questions come up when you really do your work. And I have a godbrother that I hadn't seen in a long time in Mayapur. He's Bengali. I used to see him in the early 70s, but he was a great Kirtaniya. And I saw him, and it's so nice to see godbrothers and godsisters these days, because we're getting rarer, that's one thing. And the other thing is just so many nice memories. So I stopped to talk to him in front of the temple, and he said, every day I pay my tax before I do anything else. I said, you pay your tax? And he said, I sit up on my bed right after I work, I chant my 16 rounds. That's my tax. Then I can go out. And if we integrate this into our lives individually and as a community, pay the tax, it becomes a source of great inspiration, because there's nothing that can undo the various complicated situations that come up in interpersonal relationships and intercommunity relationships, except for the solvent of hearing together. That's what does it. So I'm going to just read a purport. I picked out something from the 6th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, rather haphazardly, but that's okay. This is from the 6th canto, 2nd chapter, text number 17, and an interesting note about the 6th canto. As Prabhupada was bringing out the Bhagavatam painstakingly, he would make the cantos available, and then he wanted certain cantos printed in mass quantity for mass distribution. Do you know which ones they were? Obviously the first. What other ones? There's 2 more. No, it wasn't the 10th. Of course, the Krishna book, you could say, he did that first. But I'm saying the Bhagavatam itself. Sixth canto and second canto. First, second, and sixth. Sixth is, Prabhupada said it was so important because it talks about the holy name. And the first and second cantos, he said, I put everything in it. If you didn't have any other cantos, but you read those, I put everything in there. And it's amazing how dense they are and how Prabhupada was able to do that. Let's just hear a purport. 6-17. This is in the matter of the Vishnu Dutas answering the Yamadutas. Although one may neutralize the reactions of sinful life through austerity, charity, vows, and other such methods, these pious activities cannot uproot the material desires in one's heart. However, if one serves the lotus feet of the Personality of Godhead, he is immediately freed from all such contaminations. Here's Prabhupada's purport. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 11.2.42, Bhakti parishanu bhava viraktir anyatra cha. Devotional service is so powerful that one who performs devotional service is immediately freed from all sinful desires. All desires within this material world are sinful because material desire means sense gratification, which always involves action that is more or less sinful. Pure bhakti, however, is anyabhilashita shunya. In other words, it is free from material desires, which result from karma and jnana. One who is situated in devotional service no longer has material desires, and therefore he is beyond sinful life. Material desire should be completely stopped. Otherwise, although one's austerities, penances, and charity may free one from sin, for the time being, one's desires will reappear because his heart is impure. Thus, he will act sinfully and suffer. Text number 18. As a fire burns dry grass to ashes, so the holy name of the Lord, whether chanted knowingly or unknowingly, burns to ashes without fail all the reactions of one's sinful activities. Purport. Fire will act, regardless of whether handled by an innocent child or by someone well aware of its power. For example, if a field of straw or dry grass is set afire, either by an elderly man who knows the power of fire or by a child who does not, the grass will be burned to ashes. Similarly, one may or may not know the power of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, but if one chants the holy name, he will become free from all sinful reactions. Text number 19. If a person unaware of the effective potency of a certain medicine takes that medicine or is forced to take it, it will act even without his knowledge, because its potency does not depend on the patient's understanding. Similarly, even though one does not know the value of chanting the holy name of the Lord, if one chants knowingly or unknowingly, the chanting will be effective. Purport. In the Western countries where the Hare Krishna movement is spreading, learned scholars and other thoughtful men are realizing its effectiveness. For example, Dr. J. Stilson Judah, a learned scholar, has been very much attracted to this movement because he has actually seen that it is turning hippies addicted to drugs into pure Vaishnavas, who voluntarily become servants of Krishna and humanity. Even a few years ago, such hippies did not know the Hare Krishna mantra, but now they are chanting it and becoming pure Vaishnavas. Thus they are becoming free from all sinful activities such as illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. This is practical proof of the effectiveness of the Hare Krishna movement, which is supported in this verse. One may or may not know the value of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, but if one somehow or other chants it, he will immediately be purified. Just as one who takes a potent medicine will feel its effects, regardless of whether he takes it knowingly or unknowingly. Text 20. Sri Shukadeva Goswami continued, My dear king, having thus perfectly judged the principles of devotional service with reasoning and arguments, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu released the Brahmana Ajamil from the bondage of the Yamadutas and saved him from imminent death. my dear Maharaj Parikshit, O subduer of the enemy of all enemies, after the servants of Yamaraj had been answered by the order carriers of Lord Vishnu, they went to Yamaraj and explained to him everything that had happened. Purport. In this verse, the word pratyudita is very significant. The servants of Yamaraj are so powerful that they can never be hindered anywhere, but this time they were baffled and disappointed in their attempt to take away a man they considered sinful. Therefore they immediately returned to Yamaraj and described to him everything that had happened. 22. Having been released from the nooses of Yamaraj's servants, the Brahmin Ajamil, now free from fear, came to his senses and immediately offered obeisances to the Vishnu Dutas by bowing his head at their lotus feet. He was extremely pleased by their presence, for he had seen them save his life from the hands of the servants of Yamaraj. Purport. Vaishnavas are also Vishnu Dutas because they carry out the orders of Kṛṣṇa. Lord Kṛṣṇa is very eager for all the conditioned souls rotting in this material world to surrender to him and be saved from material pangs in this life and punishment in hellish conditions after death. A Vaishnava therefore tries to bring conditioned souls to their senses. Those who are fortunate, like Ajamil, are saved by the Vishnu Dutas or Vaishnavas, and thus they return back home, back to Godhead. O sinless Maharaj Parikshit, the order carriers of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Vishnu Dutas, saw that Ajamil was attempting to say something, and thus they suddenly disappeared from his presence. The śāstras say, Prapishta ye durachara deva brahmana nindaka apatya bhojanaste sham kale maranam dhruvam. For persons who are papishta, very sinful, and durachara, misbehaved or very unclean in their habits, who are against the existence of God, who disrespect Vaishnavas and Brahmanas, and who eat anything and everything, untimely death is sure. It is said that in Kali Yuga one has a maximum lifetime of 100 years. But as people become degraded, the duration of their lives decreases, prayanal payusha. Because Ajamil was now free from all sinful reactions, his lifetime was extended, even though he was to have died immediately. When the Vishnu Dutas saw Ajamil trying to say something to them, they disappeared to give him a chance to glorify the Supreme Lord. Since all his sinful reactions had been vanquished, he was now prepared to glorify the Lord. Indeed, one cannot glorify the Lord unless one is completely free from all sinful activities. This is confirmed by Kṛṣṇa himself in Bhagavad-gītā 7:28. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punyakarmanam tedvanva mohanir mukta bhajante mam tridavrata. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and who are freed from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. The Vishnu Dutas made Ajamil aware of devotional service so he might immediately become fit to return home back to Godhead. To increase his eagerness to glorify the Lord, they disappeared so that he would feel separation in their absence. In the mode of separation, glorification of the Lord is very intense. Let's have a little discussion now. What do you say? You ask a question that will expand the thought process. Or you can just note something that you heard. Please.
I appreciated that last thing that was spoken about, how separation.
He appreciated the last part about separation.
And how the glorification is more intense.
And how the glorification is more intense.
And I was thinking of the verse from the Chatur Shloki.
He was thinking about the verse from the Chatur Shloki. Etavan eva jignasam.
Where Kṛṣṇa is telling Lord Brahma that this truth has to be looked for in all places,
in
all circumstances.
Kṛṣṇa is telling Brahma this truth has to be looked for in all places, and all circumstances. Yeah. this is an important point because it's inevitable that we'll be engaged in various activities in this lifetime. We won't have the wherewithal to hear and chant all day long every day. Maybe some of you are doing that, but it's more likely that we have duties to do. And in the Bhagavatam, Krishna says, Tavat karma nakurvita na nirvidyeta yavata matkata shravanadalva shada shravan yavan jayate. Until one has complete faith and taste for chanting, hearing and chanting, then one must attend to one's regular duties, of course. And in the Sri Upanishad it is said, Vidyam cha yas tad vedo bayam saha avidyayam ratum tirtva vidyayam ratum ashnate. Only one who can learn the process of transcendental knowledge and that of nescience side by side can transcend the influence of repeated birth and death and enjoy the full blessings of immortality. So this idea that Devavrata Prabhu extracted from the purport about how we should search for the Supreme Lord. Hare Krishna, John Prabhu. Gaur Premanande. Great to see you. Is borne out in the Sri Upanishad that when we're performing devotional acts, even if we're very busy with other kinds of duties in life, the juxtaposition of our material work alongside our process of devotional service, says the Sri Upanishad, gives us the means to observe how Krishna's energies are working. And soon we become integrated in our lives so that we are aware that whatever is happening to us and whatever's even the source of our income and so forth, as Prahlad Maharaj says in his prayers in the 7th canto of the Bhagavatam, 9th chapter, Yasminyato yarhi yena cha yasya yasmat, that he mentions that anything that we're doing, for instance, whatever circumstance we're in, it's all Krishna. For instance, does anybody here work for a boss? Your boss is Krishna, at least a representative of him. And if you're getting a paycheck, which I hope that's happening, otherwise maybe think about another place to work, that's also Krishna, Prahlad's saying, because everything's Krishna. And when one hears Bhagavatam, chants Hare Krishna, takes prasadam, follows 4 regular principles, and then goes on with one's life, and in different eras of our life we'll have more or less responsibility to be in contact with the world. It's inevitable. All of that will transform, and we'll see it as Krishna. And etavan evajignasam tattvajignasanaatmana anvaya yatarekabhyam yat sat sarvata sarvata. That's the full verse that Krishna spoke, that Prabhu just brought up. He spoke of the Brahma at the beginning of creation. He said, search this out in all times, all places, and all circumstances. It's very practical for us, especially there's a slightly artificial standard of living in society nowadays that you really can't get out of if you live in the urban areas. You have to work and so forth. But that's no match for the Panchangam Bhakti. Consider what I said in the beginning, that if you can stay connected with these 5, even a little bit, then you'll advance in devotional service, which is a neat trick when you're ensconced in the material activities, so-called material activities of the world. Thank you. Nice point. And it was quite amazing, wasn't it, in that last verse, that the Vishnu Dutas were so aware of the situation that they immediately left before he could ask the question, because he wanted him to pray to Krishna. And they knew at that point that he was purified enough, had the wherewithal to pray. What else? What else did you hear, or that you have a question about? Yes?
Well, I think the theme that we started class with,
Can you hear back there?
The
Okay.
theme that Prabhu started the class with, can everyone hear now? Okay.
Yes.
So, that was such a beautiful theme that Sanatana Goswami instructing us, Lord Caitanya instructing Sanatana Goswami. That reminded me the two verses that the theme of that when Lord Caitanya is describing. Actually, I think all the devotees should remember these two verses. So, if you want, we can recite. Sadhu Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavata Shramana
Sangha Nama Kirtan Bhagavata Shramana
Mathura Ma Shri Murtira Shraddhaya Sevana
Mathura Vajjavya
Sakala Sadhana Shrestha Ei Pancha Anga
Sakala Satana Sheshta Ijanyatanga
Krishna Prema Janmai Panchira Alpa Sangha.
Krishna Prema.
So that, especially the last line of these two verses that you mentioned exactly verbatim, was even little contact with these 5 processes of devotional service will actually give birth to Krishna Prema. Anyone practicing. Little contact with these 500. Such a beautiful thing it was.
Well, it's helpful because I find that when something looks too hard, then it's easy to get discouraged. If you put the bar low enough and someone says, oh, anybody could do that, that's a good place for it, which is Lord Caitanya is doing there. So oftentimes devotees become intimidated because they think it's too hard or it's too much. But there are many encouraging statements like that in the śāstra. In fact, could you hand me a Bhagavad-gītā? Is there one available right there? If you can't get a Bhagavad-gītā in a Hare Krishna temple, I don't know. So at 331 is one of my favorite encouraging purports. And it has to do with doing what you can with what you have now. Because there's another phenomenon which is, because I can't do everything, I won't do anything. And in this verse, Kṛṣṇa says, one who executes his duties according to my injunctions, and who follows this teaching faithfully without envy, becomes free from the bondage of fruit of actions. And Prabhupada writes the following in his purport. The injunction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kṛṣṇa, is the essence of all Vedic wisdom, and therefore is eternally true without exception. As the Vedas are eternal, so this truth of Kṛṣṇa consciousness is also eternal. One should have firm faith in this injunction without envying the Lord. There are many philosophers who write comments on the Bhagavad-gītā but have no faith in Kṛṣṇa. They will never be liberated from the bondage of fruit of action. But an ordinary man with firm faith in the eternal injunctions of the Lord, even though unable to execute such orders, becomes liberated from the bondage of the love karma. In the beginning of Kṛṣṇa consciousness, one may not fully discharge the injunctions of the Lord, but because one is not resentful of this principle and works sincerely without consideration of defeat and hopelessness, he will surely be promoted to the stage of pure Kṛṣṇa consciousness. Do you find that encouraging?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if anybody can ask a question. It's a big test. Everything's on the line here. Okay. Yes, Prabhu.
One of the verse which we read was that when a medical practitioner he gives a medicine and person takes that medicine and that medicine he takes it but he doesn't that medicine affects him, right? The person when takes the medicine. Similarly, when chants the holy name of the Lord, unknowingly or knowingly, it will take effect on him. And that was a wonderful translation was mentioned in the...
Yeah, who knows what's in medicine anyway? Unless you're a pharmacist, and even then it's hard to know the combinations and permutations that actually works. And medicinal, the metaphor of the holy name being medicine is used in many places. Of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur calls it Aushadhi, N-H-A Ashodi Maya, Nashib Haralagi, that he calls taking the holy name medicinal. It'll cure the disease called Maya. And Rupa Goswami uses it, right? Set Krishna Nama Charitadi Sitapta Vidya Pito Patapta Rasanasya Rochikanu Kintwavarad Anudilam Kalusaiva Jushta Swadvikramad Bhavati Tad Garamula Hantri. He says that the disease we have is ignorance. In fact, for many years on book distribution, and people say, well, what are you doing for the money? It's like, we're helping people who are infected by this really horrible disease. What is it? It's like, it's called avidya. Wow, that sounds heavy. It's it's ignorance. And they go like, wow, that's really bad. It's bad, all right. So he says, when we're afflicted with the jaundice of ignorance, then we can't taste something sweet. And this has a twist to it, because when you have jaundice, one of the curatives is sugarcane juice. And by taking the sugarcane juice, at first it's bitter and repulsive. And as you continue to take it and the disease subsides, then you can gradually taste its sweetness more and more as you improve. And that's the example that Rupa Goswami gives when we first begin chanting Hare Krishna. It may not be tasty, but as we continue and our disease abates, then we'll taste it. So that's really helpful also. And in the Namashtakam by Rupa Goswami, when he's glorifying the holy name in many different ways, he Yadabaso Pyudyan Kavalita Bhavad-vanta Vibhavo Risham Tatvandanam Abhidishati Bhakti Pranayanim. He talks about how if someone can get even the dim rays of the holy name, just like when the sun hasn't even come up yet, but there's still some light in the morning. Those rays of the holy name, Yadabaso, it calls it Abaso, it's just the dim rays. Yadabaso Pyudyan Kavalita Bhavad-vanta Vibhavo. Then, if one hears the holy name, then, and that person is tattva andanam, he's blind to the truth, doesn't know anything about it. Such a person can gain an inkling for bhakti of what it is. You just hear Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And the name itself is Krishna appearing, and it awakens such a person from within and gives a sense of bhakti within the heart just by hearing Hare Krishna. That used to happen. My mother would take me to Berkeley. I lived in Lafayette, but there was a really good music teacher in Berkeley, and she would drive my brother and me to the music teacher, John Dinwiddie. He just passed away about 8 years ago. And when we drive past the campus, right there on Sproul Plaza, there was always devotees chanting, coming and going. And I'd drive by and go like, what was that? And I remember one time, one of them was walking through the neighborhood and had a madanga on his back. And just to make a joke with my brother, I called out to that devotee. I said, Hare Krishna. And he turned around and said, oh, Hare Krishna, really sincerely. And my brother looked at me like, what did you just do? And it started to affect me, the chanting, just the presence of the name. But the speaker saying, that's one of the verses in this section, that there are various ways in which people may chant for different reasons. How's it? What's the first one? No, but the Sanskrit? Helanam cha. Yes, entertainment or music, musical entertainment, or to indicate something else. Like you might start a shop and call it the Hare Krishna motorcycle shop or something like that. Actually, I've seen it in India, so I always remember. Hare Krishna motorcycle shop. And we had Kṛṣṇa copy for a long time in the Bay Area too. Like, wow, Kṛṣṇa copy. There's Krishna's name in it. And you might say it derisively. And Prabhupada used to tell us, because we did a lot of preaching, book distribution in the airports, and sometimes a lot of times people would tell us where to go. And Prabhupada said, well, if they come through and they say, well, there's that rascal Hare Krishna man. Then they said Hare Krishna, so they get that benefit. There's various ways that people get purified. What else? More discussion. Yes, okay, Sadhu.
Mike, regarding the points you were just saying, also I think the 18th verse, the next verse of this chapter, the 18th verse says that, talks about how fire, just as fire burns grass to ashes, chanting the holy name burns the sinful reactions. And I think Prabhupada in the purport, he also gives the analogy how fire can be used by anyone, whether it's an unknowing child or the knowing grandfather.
Mm.
Even if one chants the name unknowingly, it still burns the grass to ashes. And I just remembered that my uncle, Govind Shankar, when he talks to anyone, talks to non-devotees, when they ask him for his name, he never says his karmi name. He always says his name is Govinda, so that they can hear the name Govinda as well as say it, so they'll get some punya by doing that.
Mm. Yeah, and Prabhupada mentions that in relationship to devotees taking a name of Krishna. And it's in relationship to this chapter also. Because after all, Ajamil, because of his previous pious activity and involvement in Vaishnava culture, had called his son Narayan. He had a lot of sons, and he was very old, and because of that, he was constantly saying the Lord's name. That's why he became liberated. And Prabhupada mentions it's one of the reasons we change our names. Of course, sometimes Indians, you wonder if they need to change their name because they're already names of Krishna in so many ways. But it is the practice of devotional service to keep constantly in touch with the holy name. And that's one of the ways that we achieve that, by constantly saying the names of our God brothers and God sisters and members of the community that are all names of Krishna. Okay, who can ask a question? Yes? Okay, 1, 2.
You mentioned this verse, Yehi
Yehi samasprasha jaboga.
Intelligent person does not take part in the source of the contrast with yourself. But there's a lot of intelligent people in the world, so why isn't the Hare Krishna?
Well, I quoted the verse, Yehi samsvashaja bhoga, dukayonaya evate, adyantavanta kontiya nateshu ramate buddha. And that verse means that sparsha, bhoga, enjoyment from the touch of the senses to the external world, it's a kind of titillation, a stimulation of the senses. Krishna says it comes and goes. And therefore, a wise person isn't enamored by it and doesn't engage in it. It's not the prime focus of life. And Vijay Prabhu is asking if Krishna says an intelligent person doesn't take part in this, then his premise is, well, there's a lot of intelligent people in the world, so why don't they take to Krishna consciousness? Was that your question? Well, partly it's because of lack of complete knowledge. As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentioned in his teaching to Sanatana Goswami, Maya Mugdha Jivana Nahi Swata Krishna Gyan, Jivera Kripa Koila Krishna Veda Puran. That it's not automatic that one becomes Krishna conscious. There has to be intervention from a higher level. One has to come in contact with what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says in this verse is transcendental knowledge. Especially, he says, the knowledge offered by Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasadeva, because then one can understand what the goal of life is. Problematic is that although many people have intelligence, they misuse it to try to exploit the modes of material nature. Krishna mentions that in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, when Arjuna asks him, how is it that people are compelled. In fact, he's asking for himself, why am I so compelled to do things as if by force? And Krishna says it's because of Rajaguna. The powerful force of Rajaguna, and we've experienced the modes, I know I have, all the time. You can feel the force of them pulling you in a certain direction. And then Krishna says, and Prabhupada gives this metaphorical commentary where he talks about how the enemy is Rajaguna, and then it infiltrates the various parts of our being, including our senses. The senses get accustomed to experiencing things in the mode of passion and in ignorance. And then he said, if we're not careful, the enemy can move forward and get into our minds too. And then the worst thing is the enemy progresses further and pushes into the intelligence. Because the intelligence, Prabhupada says, the next door neighbor to the soul. As a indriyani pranyahur indriyabhya paramanaha manasastu parabhudhir yobhudhe paratastu saha. Lowest of all is senses, above the senses is the mind, above the mind is the intelligence, and above the intelligence is the soul proper. And so that's dangerous, because you're getting really close now. And so, although people have they have an intellect, and it's very powerful, they misuse it. Prabhupada gives the example, okay, the creation of nuclear weapons. I hate to even bring it up, because it's such a scary subject. I grew up with it as a kid, because we had these duck and cover drills when when we were kids. 68, how old are you?
67.
Okay, we went to different schools together. So, yeah, they used to tell us duck and cover, because, and then I'd ask my father about it. It's like, isn't the desk going to melt? And you know what's going to happen? Anyway, I digress. The fact is that Prabhupada says there are these ways, super intelligent, who can figure out how to make a bomb like that. And in fact, there was recently a lot of propaganda, because there was a movie about Oppenheimer, who is obviously very intelligent. They got together the most intelligent people they could find anywhere, and then they locked them into a project, and they worked on it for years, and then came up with something. It's like, yeah, thanks. Like we really needed that. To have something that was a sword of Damocles hanging over our head. So Prabhupada points out, yeah, they're using their intelligence, and they have great intelligence, but it's not helpful. So Krishna says at the end of that section of the 3rd chapter of the Gita, Evam buddhi param buddva samstabhyatmanamatmana jahi shatram mahavaho kamarupam durasadam. He said, you should purify your intelligence, because that's your power. And you can do that by reading Bhagavad-gītā and chanting Hare Krishna, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. And that was Prabhupada's plan. When he came on the Jaladuta, he brought the Bhagavatam, as we all know, and he wrote about it. He said, this is the means by which we would diminish the modes of passion and ignorance within people's hearts, and they would rise to the level of sattva and then Shuddha sattva. As is mentioned in the Bhagavatam, and Prabhupada quotes this whole paragraph in his writing on the Jaladuta, starting with Shushrusho Shadadhanasya Vasudeva Kata Richi Syan Mahat Seveya Vipra Punya Tirtha Nishevana Shinvatam Swakata Kṛṣṇa Punya Shravana Kirtana Tridyam Takstau Hyabadrani Vidhunoti Suritsatam Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyutama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishti Tada Rajas Tamo Bhava Kamalobadayasche Cheta Iter Anavidam Stitam Sattve Prasidati Evam Prasanna Manaso Bhagavad Bhakti Yogata Bhagavad Tattva Vijnana Mukta Sangha Sujayate Vijite Haryagrantish Chijante Sarva Samshaya Shiante Chasya Karmani Drishteva Manishvare. In that verse, Tada Rajas, at that time, when one is able to take advantage of hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, he said, there will come a time, tada, at that time, tada rajas, tamas, they'll be diminished. So much so, as Prabhupada said, you'll notice it. It's not that you're not going to notice it. You'll know when it comes. And I always think of, at least when we were kids, when we do a magic show, we'd use the word ta-da. Because you go, ta-da! You know, like, we'll watch this, ta-da! And it's kind of what reminds me of when I ever hear that verse, ta-da! Rajas tamo bhava, they're gone! And then one becomes super intelligent by realizing that the source of one's intelligence is Krishna. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamu. Then one is in buddhi yoga. That's real intelligence. When we're getting clear direction from Krishna from within, because there's no more modes. Sattvam Vishudam Vasudeva Shabditam Yadiyate Tatra Imam Upavrita. One's uncovered now, and you can actually hear Krishna's directed. Then it's real intelligence, and you'll notice that devotees try to do good for everyone, whereas those who are intelligent materially, it's counterproductive. It doesn't help because it's contaminated by the lower modes. Your turn.
So, on one hand, we hear that, just a little touch with the 5 limbs of bhakti, one can, perfect one's life. And then, similarly, over a period of time while practicing bhakti, we become complacent. And the same 5 processes, the 5 limbs, even though practicing on a daily basis, we still don't feel really connected. Now, what I'm trying to ask is, sometimes it happens, like the focus sometimes is on a lot of service. When we come together, we're doing a lot of service, things need to be done. But then at the same time, there is a need for personal time for sadhana, other than the 16 rounds of chanting, to actually deep dive into the scriptures or read Prabhupada's books. How did you balance? Like we've seen in the 70s and the 80s, devotees, the spirit was more preaching and a lot of service. Prabhupada was building so many temples, and everyone was working really, really hard physically. And then when Prabhupada left the planet, there was some sort of a void all of a sudden, and many devotees felt lost. They had a feeling of disconnect from the movement, from their own practice. How can one avoid that in one's life, and how did you balance service with sadhana, and how do we integrate that for a stronger and healthier
community? Oh, such a nice question. It's very practical. First, as a general statement, or I should say overarching statement and an idea, is you should have a lifetime plan. And that could be, and I recommend, hey, we've got some sadhus in here. Hare Krishna. How are you? Good to see you. We should have a goal to put together one full lifetime in Krishna consciousness. If you have that in mind, that the whole thing, from whenever I started to whenever I breathe my last breath, somehow or other I'm going to stick to Krishna consciousness. That's a good place to start, is write it in your book. If you don't have a book, get one and write it down. Because it really helps to have that samskar, goal, but that's sankalpa. Yeah, that sankalpa. That one lifetime put it together. And my observation in my life is, what success looks like is a series of comebacks. In fact, in any discipline, you got to know how to make a comeback, because the mind's obviously going to take us off course, and in different eras of our life, we're going to react to the world differently, and we're going to be trying to find our way forward, and inevitably there's going to be some kind of disturbance to one's practice, one way or another. Whether you mentioned you get bored by it at a certain point, or you lose interest, or there's some other distraction, like life experiences when one goes through transition at different points of life. There are oftentimes one has to readjust. How do I do it now? What I did at somebody was in the ashram for a year and see how to do it here. How do I do it now when I have to pay for an apartment and so forth? And that goes to the verse, vidyam cha yas. You have to live your life in the material world, and it has to become holistic. That you know how to live in the world, not just theoretical, but you actually really feel it. And that's what I started with. Any philosophy that you don't have access to or doesn't directly affect you is useless. You actually have to live it. And so to do that, you live your life, and you keep coming back to whatever form of Krishna consciousness you can achieve at that particular time. That's why I read that other verse. Prabhupada said, you may not be able to do it in the beginning, but don't give up faith. And he said, don't resent the principle that you can't do it in the beginning. And as far as the history goes, you mentioned a particular era when things were busy. I can't remember an era that wasn't busy, Krishna conscious movement. But it's true. I can remember that there was a push for everything. And Prabhupada, of course, was setting the pace, a blistering pace that practically nobody could keep up with. And my experience, I got an anecdotal statement directly from Prabhupada in circa 1974 when he came to San Francisco. I lived in that temple on Valencia Street in the Mission. And we had a little Sankirtan party, and Prabhupada was giving darshans. So he invited our little party over there to meet with him. And Prabhupada was sitting at his low desk, as he did. He sat on the floor and he had his desk, and we were sitting in front. We were just kids. And Prabhupada, our temple president, read the scores from the book distribution. And then we were waiting for what Prabhupada was going to say. Like, very good boys, or whatever, and girls. Yeah, boys and girls. And he said to us, you must also read my books. It was like a shot right across his desk. He said, I did not write these just for selling. I wrote them for you to read, become pure devotees, and go back to Godhead. And because I had heard it directly from Prabhupada, if I had a dollar for every Prabhupada said I heard when I joined the movement, I could pay for the rest of your temple here. But I heard it directly from Prabhupada, and I felt his stern resolve that that's what he wanted. So I remember that throughout the various times when it was work, I always felt I had permission to take time to read my quota. And later on, as far as reading Prabhupada's books goes, I came up with a quota system for myself that really worked well and still works well. Because suddenly one day, when I was driving my car, I realized there's a finite number of pages in Prabhupada's books. Even though they seem unapproachable because there's so many of them, there is a finite number of pages. And then it occurred to me, if I just write down how many pages there were, and then apportion them each day for finishing the books in a certain amount of time, I could actually calculate it to the day. And Srivas Pandit helped me we went through all the books and we looked up all that, and we made a little chart. And I called it Be a Sage Page by Page. And that really helped. But as far as the phenomena you mentioned, that there's a time at which you may feel overwhelmed, or you may feel that what happened to my vibrant practice or something like that. Those happen in every discipline. When you're doing something every day and you're doing it for a lifetime, there's going to be times when you wonder, what am I doing? And why am I doing this? So I find it extremely important to ask the question again and again, why am I doing this? And come back to what brought you in the first place. Does anybody remember the first time they discovered the Hare Krishna mantra or the Sangha of devotees? And the exhilaration one feels? And coming back to that is very helpful. And just not assuming that I'm going to continue on the same level, and remembering that when I find myself off track, it's okay to come back again. One of my godbrothers, who joined in 1970 in Japan, had told me that he had gotten initiated, and then in Japan there weren't huge crowds of devotees, so he had an opportunity to talk to Prabhupada directly and personally right before one of the morning walks. And he told Prabhupada that, I made all these vows, but I'm not able to keep them. He's just admitted to Prabhupada, I'm not able to follow. And Prabhupada looked at him and he said, one day you will walk. That's what he said to him. He said a little child learns to walk. He gets up, falls down, but he's strengthening himself by that process. And one day he'll come to the point where he'll be able to walk. And that happened. But a lot of it was because Prabhupada's statement was so encouraging. He said, of course. It wasn't that Prabhupada thought, like, how dare you? Now you're going to hell. But he knew that he was giving people a goal that was extremely difficult to keep. But if one was sincere, then one would grow into it and become strong. Sometimes monks who live in monasteries, they have midlife crises also. And they have to find some way to rediscover what brought them into the practice in the first place. And we all have to do that on a regular basis. In fact, assume nothing and have no sense of entitlement is a good way to do that. Kunti says, Janmaishvarya Shrutta Shibir Edamana Madapuman Naivar Yavidatum Vai Tomakinshana Gocharam. That don't take anything for granted. And don't get enamored of whatever your position is, because that can do it also. When we first come to Krishna consciousness, there's a sense of awe and reverence for every devotee who ever walked the earth or is walking it now. And then there can be also an involvement in getting a position, Janma, Aishvarya, Shruta, Shribir, whatever, and then we can lose that vital sense. And when we look at Arjuna, after the Kurukshetra battle, and after Krishna left the planet, there's a scene there in the Bhagavatam, the first canto, when he feels that he's lost. And then he remembers the Bhagavad-gītā, of all things, the Bhagavad-gītā. If all else fails, and it will, read the Bhagavad-gītā. Because it's the simple things. And I might start thinking of lofty things, or I might think, I already know this. If you've ever met anybody that said that. I did once. We were going door to door around San Jose. I knocked on the door. It was about 11:30 in the morning. Sun was out. The guy came out in his bathrobe. I showed him. He saw I had books and he goes, oh, I already know that. I know everything, he said. So I called the other devotees. I said, you got to see this guy. He knows everything. He goes, no, not like that. But there's a way that we can develop that sense. I already know this. I already know Bhagavad-gītā. Well, rediscover it. And that's vital daily practice. Rediscover your rounds. It was one of the points about chanting japa. I was going to quote my own course, but that sounds really... There is a point I've considered, I'll say it like that, and that is you're either improving or you're getting worse. You never stay the same in any practice. As soon as you think, I got this, that's when you're finished. When you think you're finished, you're finished. So never think that. Always think I'm an eternal student. I saw that when I came to your music recital. He did a fantastic music recital. Probably all of you came. I can't remember. It was a big auditorium. And I got introduced to the Carnatic culture of music. And it was very much related to the sense of the practice of Bhagavad-gītā, in the sense like, never think, always be humble. Always offer respects to the teachers above you. And always think that there's vast room for improvement. And I could sense it in that room. It wasn't a blatantly spiritual activity. It was a discipline. But still the culture was there. And we have to have that culture also, to re-examine ourselves. And also, as you were speaking, I remembered one of my key points to give an answer to that is, it's extremely helpful to have mentors and coaches. I find in my life, anything I want to do, if I want to excel and push myself beyond what I think I can do, I have to have somebody pushing me who knows how to do it properly. If it's a physical activity or studying something, and in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, it's vital that we have that kind of mentorship where somebody's there giving us that push. That's how we get better. In fact, that's the only way we get better. Really, because it's quite natural. Srivas Pandit also gave me this book once, and it was about how the senses in the human body have the tendency to shut down when they're not being used. What was that?
A push.
What?
A push.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very interesting point. It's just like the eyes. They just like your computer, like an Apple computer, or not any computer. When you're not using it, it goes on sleep mode, and the senses are like that too, and our minds are like that too. They're designed to save energy. They don't waste it all the time. I see everything all the time. They start winding down. And of course, Kṛṣṇa says in the Bhagavad-gītā, yukta hara viharasya, yukta chestasya karmasu, yukta swapna babodasya, yoga bhavati dukkhaha. We have to live a balanced life. But we have to also know that unless we have a means to keep in the vidhi, in the practice, and somebody pushing us, and the next thing to go for, and the next thing to go for, then we're gonna stagnate, and we're gonna get into a plateau. I hate plateaus. I'm always looking for them where it is, and I always find myself on one, and then I have to find a way out of it. And that's what I mean about it's a series of comebacks. But if you can put together one lifetime in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, and just stay steady in something. Doesn't matter what it is, something in Kṛṣṇa consciousness. You don't have to be a huge hero. You don't have to know how to build temples in all parts of the world, although that's nice. You just have to know how to be sincere and keep going. And one of the points that I love in Brahma's prayers, in Brahma Stuti, he says, Jnane prayasam urapasya namanta eva, jivanti san mukaritam bhavadiya vartam, stane stita shrutikatam tanavanmano virye, prayaso jitta jito pyasitaistrilokyam. And in this he's saying, forget about trying to understand Kṛṣṇa through your intellect. He's got a quad core thing inside. Even if you have 1,000,000 core, you're not going to be able to understand him, he's saying, because forget it. And then he says, Jivanti san mukaritam bhavadiya vartam. And our Acharya commentators say this Jivanti means if you can somehow or other stay alive in Kṛṣṇa consciousness, and if all you do is stay alive so you can continue doing your hearing and chanting, you've got it made. And that goes along with another verse in that section, and I will stop in a minute here, and that is the verse everybody knows, Tenu kampam susumikshamano. In that verse, where Brahma says, if you are able to stay the course in Krishna consciousness and accept whatever comes to you as Krishna's mercy, then Sadaya Bhak, you inherit the kingdom of God. So the first part of the purport is by Sridhar Swami. And he says, what is the duty of the son of a rich man? Stay alive. The Bee Gees said it all those years ago, staying alive. So all you have to do is stay alive. And if you can just manage somehow or other to stay alive in Krishna consciousness, then you'll inherit the kingdom of God. And that's if you think of it like that, it becomes exciting. That, yeah, let me see how I can stay alive. Om Tat Sat. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking such a compelling question.
Maharaj, how can we choose a mentor for with Maharaj?
How do you choose mentors?
Yeah.
Well, try to find somebody you like. That helps. And who's expert at what they do and who's enthusiastic about it. I collect them. When I see somebody I like, and for instance, I'll hear somebody give a class or do a presentation or music or whatever it is, and I say, I like that person. I like the way they speak, and I try to develop a relationship with them. And if they're open to it, then whatever their expertise is, I try to connect with them. And a lot of times I think, well, I'm too stupid, really, to pick up what they're talking about because they're so expert. But what I've found is, if I just force myself to be with that person on a regular basis, and especially a kind of student-teacher relationship, even if I feel like I'm the slowest person at it in the world, somehow or other there's what is that called, an airdrop? Do you have that on non-Macs? Does anybody have a non-Mac? You guys have a Mac? Android? Do they have airdrop kind of thing?
Oh yeah,
Of course they do. I mean, what are you talking about? You don't have that. What do you have? So I feel like sitting with those kind of people that I resonate with, and they're obviously more advanced than me, and who isn't. So it's just, if I can somehow get a relationship with them, then naturally it just comes out. Even if I have a conversation with them, I'm writing stuff down and going, oh my God, this is really good stuff. And so look for them. Pray for it. And one of the prayers that I like to make myself before I chant is, oh my Lord, please give me the best of association and the wherewithal to take advantage of it. Because you can get good association, but if you're envious and you go like, well, why does that guy think he's so advanced? Then you don't get anything. But if you appreciate those who are advanced, then even just that, whatever you appreciate appreciates, and it also, whatever they have, it goes in you. Voltaire once said, if you appreciate the good qualities in others, then they become yours. Opposite is if you're envious, then you don't get anything from anybody. You got to live a sad little life, locked away in your own mind. Well, yes. Hare Krishna.
So from whatever you said, it is so nice that ultimately it's pure devotion that we're talking about, and what you do is pure devotion, Maharaj. But we're all trying to get there to that platform of pure devotion. Anya Abhilashita Shunyam Jnana Karmadi Anavritam Anupudena Krishna Anushilana Bhakti Uttama. When we say that verse, we understand that verse. It means a lot, right? You have to be engaged in the service of Krishna. Anudinam, you continuously engage. There's no interruption when it comes to pure devotion. You touch any of the limbs, but when it comes to interruption, they are interrupted during various times of the day. Be it work, be it children, be it this, be it that. All the time there is interruption to devotional service. We're not like Arjuna, where when he was in the battlefield, he was just thinking about Krishna. His mind was not deviated. Even though he was fighting, imagine somebody is performing a surgery, and they just have to think about Krishna. It's not possible.
Are you a surgeon? Oh, okay.
My husband is.
Husband.
But yes, that is reality when it comes to being attacked by the modes of passion, as you mentioned. But to get that pure devotion, as you rightly said, we have to be getting that from a devotee who has that. And that's not easy, Maharaj, to get in association of a pure devotee who has that, who has Drida Shraddha in him. That's what we call it, right? I mean, to enter into bhakti, the platform of pure devotion, Drida Shraddha is needed. And through your blessings, Maharaj, we all need that. And that's the only way.
Well, I need your blessings too. I mean, that's why I come here. And we're working under a pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada. And Bhagavatam says, Bejare munio tagre bhagavantam adhoksajam sattvam vishuddham shemaya kalpanteye nutaniha. That previously, the great devotees, they worship the Lord because He's beyond the modes of material nature, and therefore they derive the greatest benefit of life. And anyone who follows in their footsteps, even if they're whatever position they're in, they'll achieve the same result. And this is also mentioned in Bhagavatam 10th canto, Tvayam Bhujaksha Kila Sattvadam Ni Samadhinam Esh Chetasaike Pada Potena Mahat Kṛṣṇa Kurvanti Kovatsa Badam Vababdim. The demigods praying to Lord Krishna within the womb say that the means to come to pure devotional service is to follow the process that's given by the pure devotee. Pada potena mahat kṛṣṇa kurvanti kovatsa badam vababdim. So Prabhupada explains that when the pure devotees, the great acharyas, like Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, etc., they give a formula, a system that everyone can follow. Did you see how Prabhupada did that, right? He made a big plan for the whole world. And then he enacted it and he gave everyone these parameters how to follow. So when you follow the system, Prabhupada says, that's the boat that carries you across the material nature. And what's more, the process given by pure devotees, the acharyas, is so powerful that when you approach that boat, the ocean shrinks. How does it? How small does it become? How small is it? It's as small as the hoofprint of a calf. Kurvanti kovatsa padam vababdim. That huge ocean shrinks and you can step over it. And it was Prabhupada's consideration of pure devotee. There was a group, there was a very charismatic person who had a huge following in Hawaii. And he read Prabhupada's books and he brought all his followers to the Krishna conscious movement. He wasn't a Vedic person, he was just a charismatic guru type person and had read this, that, eclectic. And then when he read Prabhupada's books, he said, it's all here. We should follow him and all of you should follow him. So he brought all of his followers. There was a huge influx of new people that came to Krishna consciousness because of this person. And then later on, a lot of the people that had come with him, who were his followers originally, they integrated in the Krishna consciousness movement, but at the same time they thought, no, only our guy who brought us here, he's actually the only pure devotee amongst all those who weren't Prabhupada. And so he wrote a letter to Prabhupada to indicate that, because it was, your normal garden variety schism, where we're better than everybody else. And so Prabhupada wrote back a letter. It's available on the Vedas. It's so heartwarming and uplifting to read, where he's saying, yes, so your leader is a pure devotee, and then he starts naming all these other people who are at odds with that leader, and they said, oh, and he's a pure devotee, and that one's a pure devotee. He said, everyone in the Krishna conscious movement is pure devotee. And he said, what's more, they're all going to go back to Godhead. He said, except for Mr. Nair. Mr. Nair, he was the one who was trying to rip Prabhupada off with the Jew who land. He just kind of humorously threw that in there. He said, this one's going to go back to Godhead. They're all going back. They're all pure devotees because they're following a pure devotee, and Prabhupada never claimed to be a pure devotee. He would always say, I just follow a pure devotee. That's the standard of the process. And so then he said, yeah, everyone's going back to Godhead, except Mr. Nair. I mean, everyone just wanted to be around Prabhupada because he was channeling the disciplic succession, because he didn't claim anything except for following his Guru Maharaj's instructions. And we can do the same thing. However distracted we are, whatever our lives are, Prabhupada's life was distracted. Prabhupada came to Ottadanga Junction Road and he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur by the force of his friend who dragged him there. Prabhupada had seen enough sadhus in his life because his father brought every single sadhu to his home and to bless my son that he'll become a devotee of Srimati Radharani. For many of them, he kept ganja because they'd come to the house and it's like, here's your hookah, smoke the ganja. And Prabhupada had seen every kind of person like that, and he was in the Gandhi movement at that time, wearing khadi. And then, his friends said, come meet this is different. And no, I've seen them all. And there was a scene in the street where he's dragging him, please come. And he wanted him to come because Prabhupada was the leader amongst all his friends. And they wanted verification from him. They wanted the stamp. So he went there, he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and before Prabhupada even sat up from offering obeisances, his guru started telling him, you should spread this around the Western world. And after his meeting there, he said, I accepted him in my heart as my spiritual master. It was 11 or 12 years before he got initiated. And the reason Prabhupada mentions is because he had children at the time, he had a business he was running, very distracted. So Prabhupada's life, if you examine it, you'll see he set an example that we can follow. Whatever situation you're in now, Panchangam Bhakti, stay close to the 5 things that that are so powerful that even if you have a little touch with them, even if you don't have complete faith in them, they'll act in your life. And the power of the disciplic succession coming through the pure devotees, Kirata, Hunanda, Pulinda, Bhukasha, Abhira Shumba, Yamaha, Kasade, etc., is so powerful that anyone can overcome any situation they're in now by stane stita shrutigatam tanavan manobir. That stay, whatever position you're in, you can't get out of it anyway, right? Right? So add the Panchangam Bhakti and then magic will happen. Hare Krishna. So it's probably really late because I'm famous for going way over time. And I just want to express my gratitude for all you're doing up here because it's significant. And he's been cooking. You got a preparation cooking up here. It's been on the stove for a while. And there's something to be said for that, a slow cooking thing. That you keep it on a heat. You don't take it off and you keep going. And after a while you start noticing, by Krishna's amazing grace, things are coming together. And that's what's happening here. So everyone's noticing you up here. This community's definitely, there's a light coming out of this. It's like when the government flies over with infrared, they can see heat down below. And demigods are looking down here going, wow, that little flame is getting bigger and bigger here. So watch out, because you're going to get more and more service, because communities, whatever you do, you stick together and you keep doing service, keep helping one another, keep hearing and chanting, read Prabhupada's books, follow the 4 regular principles, don't have cognitive dissonance by not following the 4 regular principles. It's just not worth it to be a crazy person. And try to help other people. Open your hearts and do what Prabhupada did, is open it so that people can come in and take advantage of the Krishna consciousness movement. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Sri Sri Panchatattva, Sri Sri Radha Madan Mohan, Sri Sri Lakshmi Nrsingadev, who are the main deities in Sacramento. Radha?
Not named yet. Not decided.
Our
We're thinking of Radha Gopinath.
Our dear Shri Sri Radha Gopinath if you so desire, please empower our magnificent ISKCON Sacramento. Is that what you call yourselves? Sangha. That everyone here may feel the power of devotional service, of Panchangam Bhakti. May always work together harmoniously to create an environment that people want to come into and be devotees. And may all resources flow here to be used to glorify Krishna and increase the Sankirtan movement. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer, in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpataruscha kripa sindhaveva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah nantakoti vaishnavini ki jai Gaur Premanande Hari Bol. Okay.